There are certain experiences that are universal. Everyone has them or has something like them that are awesome in the old school sense of the word. You're filled with awe or wonder or mystery or fear or delight or joy or possibility when you have these experiences. And this third one might be a little in tension with the first point, that are untellable. In order to understand the experience, you have to have participated in it directly. You can't have a secondhand experience of what took place. More about that third one and how it sits in tension with the first a little later. So there are lots of examples we could give of experiences that are universal, awesome, and untellable. And I'm going to give a possibly goofy example to start with. Have you ever been in a room or a context where laughter takes over? You're in some place and the laughter hits this point that is almost ecstatic in nature. It takes over the entire conversation or entire dynamic of what's going on. In high school, I was really into theater, and I think it was at the start of grade 12 when the theater company I was in decided we're gonna write a play and then perform it for a bunch of elementary schools in the neighborhood. And I wrote a monologue for the play. I wrote a speech for it, and the time came to debut the draft of the speech for my classmates and my teachers. I remember very vividly. We were in this carpeted rehearsal area. My classmates were all seated in front of me. The two teachers who ran the theater company were there, and I said the opening line of the monologue I had written, and something I did not expect happened. Do you know the expression erupted with laughter? In that moment, there was an eruption. It was a volcano that went off. This was laughter that was like lava flying in the air, laughter that was like tears coming down people's cheeks, laughter that was I can't breathe kind of laughter. It was an awesome experience. I was totally startled. One of my actually lifelong gifts meets burdens is I have long been a purveyor of unintentional comedy. I've often said things that folks did not anticipate was going to be funny, and this was one of the most intense examples of that. And in this moment, I felt confused and powerful and a little dangerous. I didn't quite know what to do, and I learned as I told the story of this experience later on, and I told it, as you would expect, to a bunch of people in the coming weeks and actually in the coming years and even decades. I learned that I was not going to tell people what the line was that I had said that had invited the laughter, because the first number of times I told this story, I did that. I said this, and people were rolling on the floor with laughter. And what happened is I would tell them what I had said, and folks would either laugh politely, or on one case, someone looked at me and said, "But that's not funny." And it actually felt sort of almost desecratory that I'd had this almost holy experience, and folks were saying, that doesn't seem funny. And of course it didn't. Of course it didn't seem funny to them. That experience was an untellable experience. What do we say when we have encountered a joke like that, a moment of hilarity like that? I guess you had to be there. But here's the paradox. That experience is untellable, but you can understand it. You can understand it by drawing on your own experience where laughter took over a room. Maybe you were at a party at some occasion, and the conversation had been going on for a while, and then it hit this point where everything was funny, where just everything got a big laugh. And there was a point where someone could have walked in the room and said hi, and people would have started laughing. Someone could have turned on a light and people would have started laughing. Someone could have said, "This is a stalk of celery," and people would have started laughing. And you can't explain that. You had to be there. Universal, awesome, and untellable. And we could give lots more examples of experiences like that, many of which are way heavier than laughter coming to the level of ecstasy. Being with someone when they die is an experience that is universal. It's not as universal as it used to be, is it? Death often is kind of put behind a curtain in hospitals now, but it's an experience that still most of us will get in our lifetimes. It is awesome. There's something that happens in that room as someone dies that you really can't quite name the power or the mystery of that. And unless you were there in that particular room in that particular time of dying, you can't name exactly what took place there. The same thing happens in nature, doesn't it? There's certain moments of deep wonder in nature. What's the John Denver line? On the top of the world, looking down on creation. These are universal, they're awesome, and unless you were beside that particular lake or in that particular meadow or on that particular hillside, you can't entirely understand what took place. Love might be the kind of ultimate example of this experience that is universal and awesome and untellable, unless you have that particular parent-child relationship or relationship between neighbors or between friends or between colleagues or over a marriage that lasts across decades. You can't know exactly what took place within that love. All of these experiences are unique, and here is a paradox, maybe. All of these experiences are in some way the same experience. In spite of them being unique, or let's even try this one, because they're unique, is that possible? They have a common heart that beats within all of them. All of them point us at wonder, point us at mystery, point us at awe. There's a popular theological question that goes something like this: if there is a God, why does God not show God's self to us? Why doesn't God direct the angels to rent a biplane and fly across the sky, towing a banner that says, "Hi, it's God. I'll be answering questions on Zoom at 3 p.m." Why doesn't God do that? And there's lots of answers that theologians and philosophers have ventured to that question. A number of the people who founded America were what were called deists. So they were folks who reckoned that God created the world and then kind of stepped back and is not involved anymore. So you may have heard the expression a watchmaker God, and that is this idea or substantially similar to this idea. So God creates this mechanism, starts it, and then steps away and just kind of watches the mechanism, either never intervening or intervening only rarely when the mechanism needs some repair. So God might occasionally put a little oil in, but otherwise God is a watcher, not a participant. And so in this case, for the deists, the answer to the question, why doesn't God communicate with us directly and unambiguously, is that because God doesn't do anything directly and unambiguously. God's time of intervention in creation is done and over with. An answer I like better than that one is that we don't get direct and unambiguous communication from God because God respects our freedom too much. God prizes human agency and the human ability to make decisions and make mistakes, including bad decisions and including acting as if there were no God at all. In this respect, God is like a loving parent who knows that if the child is going to be fully alive, if the child is going to discover the meaning of life, and could we say the meaning of life is something like figuring out how to love fully, figuring out how in the imitation of Christ to be fully human, the parent knows that if the child is going to do this, the child must be permitted to take risks and make mistakes and make decisions that are not necessarily the parent's decision. So the parent permits the child to go to the park by themselves, or to ride a bicycle or climb a tree, and to learn and risk, even though the parent may be biting their fingernails while all of this is happening. And then when the child returns home, maybe just fine, maybe with a scraped elbow, God welcomes the child back into God's arms. A third possible answer, and this one actually I don't think is argues with the second. I think it could be complementary to it. A third possible answer to the question, why don't we hear directly from God, is actually we hear directly from God all the time. That in these experiences that are universal, that are awe-filled, and that are untellable, we are catching a glimpse of God. We are seeing God in these experiences. As Charles McGee said a few weeks ago, in these moments we discover that this is a life full of miracles, just one miracle after another. So we perhaps spend our lives asking God for proof of God's existence, and then at the end of our lives look back with that clarity that maybe comes in heaven and say, gosh, God was talking to me all the time, was showing up in my life all the time. All of these experiences, maybe, that are universal and awe-filled and untellable, all of them are God sightings. So Peter and John and James, the sons of Zebedee, go on a hike with Jesus. They decide to go up the mountain in order to pray, and they go up and up and up. They go up past the tree line, up so high that the clouds, incredibly, are down below them, up where the air is thin and clean, up where you can see over multiple mountain ranges, and the friends wonder if this is what the world looks like to the eagles and to the angels and perhaps to God. And there up on the mountaintop, the three friends begin to squint in the brightness of the day. I don't know if there are sunglasses in the ancient Near East. Perhaps they pull their hats a little lower, or maybe they put their hands up to slow down the light. And at a certain point, one of them realizes that it's not the sun that is shining, but it's Jesus that is shining. Jesus has become the sun. He's become like a sunset, beautiful and awesome and dangerous. You can only look at him for a few seconds, lest you burn your retinas. You have to look away after looking for a little bit. When the friends remember this experience later, none of them can say if the shining went on for minutes or hours or days. The experience on the mountaintop is like a dream. Indeed, there are several times when the friends almost fall asleep, but they don't. They don't fall asleep. They stay awake. And then at a certain point, there's two people with Jesus. And again, this is like a dream. They don't know how they know that the two people are Moses and Elijah. They just know. And they listen to Moses and Elijah, these two ancient prophets, and Jesus talk. And Peter, in a moment of beautiful innocence, blurts out, "Let's build houses and stay here forever." And then it shifts. Then this cloud comes in. They're so high up on the mountain that it is on earth as it is in heaven. And they are in the midst of a cloud. And maybe in the cloud they can still see Jesus shining. The way on a cloudy day in Portland you can still tell where the sun is, even though you can't see it directly. It lights up. It lights up the cloud. And within the cloud there is a voice that is not Jesus' voice, or Moses's or Elijah's voice, and is not any of the three friends' voice. It's another voice. And the friends are terrified when they hear it. And the voice says something that they have heard tell of. They've heard that at Jesus' baptism, the same words were spoken, "This is my son, the beloved, listen to him." And then it's over. The cloud goes away, and the three friends and Jesus hike back down the mountain, and they tell nobody about what happened. That's kind of a weird detail, isn't it, at the end of this story? They've had this amazing experience, and they tell no one about what happened. We could have a lot of guesses about why they don't tell anyone, but my guess for today is that this experience was untellable, that they couldn't tell anyone because it wouldn't make sense if you weren't there. You had to be there in order to understand what took place. But if we're right in saying that, if my guess is right in saying that all of these experiences are in some way the same experiences, all experience of universality, of awe, and of untellability at some way point to the same reality, then you can understand. You can draw on your own experiences and have a guess what it must have been like for the three friends with Jesus on the mountaintop. This is a weird moment in our culture, isn't it? In our world in general. We're 2 years into a pandemic, and incredibly, appallingly, Russia has just started the first land war in Europe in 80 years, and it's a time of anxiety, of dysregulation. The entire system, the entire culture is dysregulated right now, is off balance. We know in this city and in many cities, shooting deaths are way up. We know that radical drug use remains out of control. We know that vehicular deaths are up. That's a startling one, isn't it? In the anxiety of this moment, folks are running more stop signs and running more red lights, or otherwise behaving aggressively in cars than they were before. Just this morning, it's a trivial example, but it's fresh in my mind. I rode my bike down here, and a pedestrian just began screaming at me. Began telling me to go jump in a lake. Well, that was not exactly the words that they used, but that was the spirit of their message. We hadn't had any kind of interaction, certainly no kind of run-in, but there was this abrupt anger that suddenly came my direction. It's really this. It feels in many ways like this off-balance time, and maybe in this time of dysregulation, we can find comfort in these God sightings. We can find comfort in these moments that are universal, that are awe-filled, and that are untellable. Maybe in them we discover that God is close at hand. We still may have hard questions for God. We still may have resentments or anger we want to share with God. We still may want to ask God, why do you permit war? Why do you permit pandemic? And those are good questions, and questions that God can take. God is not fragile. God can take our anger and our questioning and our sadness. And we may not get a good answer or a complete answer to that question this side of heaven. But I do want to suggest that there's comfort in and reassurance and strength in these sightings of God, in these moments where we catch a glimpse of mystery. We spend our lives maybe asking God for proof that God is with us, and then we discover in these encounters that God was with us all the time. In these encounters that are universal and awesome and untellable, we discover that God, bright, shining as the sun, has been with us from the beginning, and that God will be with us till the end.